gets done on the cell phone. And outside, I've been very careful about that, making sure it's all outside of,
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're going to give it a few more minutes just to give folks a chance to log on. We have a bunch of people popping on, so thank you again, and we'll begin shortly.
don't know. I've got to look into that.
Good morning, everyone. I think we're about ready to start. We've got a good participation rate. My name is Darby. I am one of the board members for Southwest Parking and Transportation. It's really important to us as an organization that we bring you these webinars. Tobias Marx with the City of Bend, Oregon, is also one of our board of directors. He is also our presenter today. He's talking about parking happiness. We all work here, so we know how happy parking is. So that's a good thing to help us learn how to share. So Tobias is the Parking Services Division Manager, City of Bend. His focus is on innovative transportation and mobility programs. He's known for his data-driven approaches, and his aim is to enhance curb space utilization, user satisfaction. And in Bend, he streamlined his operations with comprehensive parking management system that with the goal of making the parkers happy. So today, that is what he's going to be speaking about, parking happiness. If you have any questions, let him know. Raise your hand, take off your speaker, whatever, whatever works for you. And Tobias, if you're ready, I'm gonna send this on over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Darby. Good morning, everybody. Glad that we can do this. And I know it's always really funny to start a parking conversation with the topic of parking happiness, but it's really something that I'm very passionate about because I think that often parking, and I think we all know that parking, the conversation about parking, maybe not between us as professionals, but certainly with the public, can turn negative very quickly, right? We all had that one person before who received a citation and is really angry about it. And so that's where this came from, this idea of like, hey, let's talk about this a little bit different and maybe in a fun way. Today's webinar is a bit special for me because like I've talked about this parking happiness before, but usually I can just always like talk about whatever I want and I don't have anybody locally with me. But I think our new parking coordinator is actually on this call too, to listening in. So I need to be a little bit more careful about what I'm saying, how I'm saying it, and make sure that I'm not going into fairy tales too much. Couple rules of engagement. There's a good chunk of time at the end for questions if you have any. If you have any in between, raise your hand or unmute and ask it. But besides that, like make sure you're muted so that we can go through the presentation as efficient as we can. One little note, a few slides in, I'm doing a poll and we're doing the poll with a platform called Mentimeter. So if you go to, you will see it on the screen in a little bit. There's a web link, and then there is a code that if you enter that, you can actually live vote once we get to that, just so that you're prepared for that. So let's dive in and try to talk about parking happiness. So a quick introduction about myself. So I'm actually still fairly new to parking or to the parking world. I think I'm now in almost 8 years in the industry, which I know for compared to other people is not that long. I've been in Bend, Oregon for about 5 years now. And we moved here as a family from beautiful Lowell, Massachusetts. And in Lowell, Massachusetts, I was known as it's actually not a good achievement, but I was known as the king of parking tickets. I think I had hundreds of them because I used to park right here in this parking space. And I played the game that I thought it's fine. I can make it in the 2 hours and I can come back down and I can refill my meter. And I lost every day, basically. Whenever I went to get a parking permit in the garage that was really just 2 minutes away, the office was closed. There was no online way to purchase a permit. So I eventually gave up because I'm like, I don't really care. I'm just going to play the game. And I mean, that was years ago. So now I wouldn't do that anymore, of course. And then this comment about never again Philly, never again Philly. And this is the picture on the right bottom. Never again Philly was really the reason why I got into parking. And some of you might have heard me tell the story, but long story, very, very short. It was a weekend that we wanted to spend as a family in Philadelphia. Our kids were still very small. I think our oldest was maybe 8 or 9 or maybe 9 or 10 at the time. And so we had arrived in Philadelphia. We parked on this road about a 5-minute walk away from attractions. And we looked at all the signs, and there was still a big pool with plenty of signs on them. And we determined it's Saturday morning. We can park here. Well, lo and behold, we did not see the little tiny rider. There was about probably 5 by 5 inches or something like that, that said honorary console parking to the left. And so when we came back 30 minutes later, our car was towed. This turned out to be a real fun story as a parking professional to tell, because we ended up having to Uber to the parking authority to try to get our car back, which we didn't get back because I still had 2 outstanding parking tickets in Massachusetts, which means if you have outstanding tickets in Massachusetts, eventually your registration gets suspended. Our registration was suspended. We couldn't release our car. We ended up renting a car, driving back to Massachusetts, going to the DMV Monday morning, a weekend later, booking a one-way ticket to fly back to Philly and redeem our car. And I was running cultural affairs and special events for the city of Lowell at the time. And I remember saying to the parking lot, the toll lot attendant, and I'm like, this was just really funny because I was just working with our parking director in Massachusetts to like improve our brand. How do we communicate better? How do we communicate rules better? And I just thought there must be a better way. And that's really what launched my journey to get into parking. That opportunity came a little bit later, and so I joined. And so that really, I guess, set the tone for me to say, like, I don't want other people to have this experience. How do we really improve that, right? And eventually I got the chance to work in parking and try my very best to make it better. I don't think we have it all figured out, but we're making it there. So now, learning objectives for today is really finding like an answer for each one of you who are participating to this equation of parking happiness equals what? What does it mean? What is it? Why do we talk about that? What are the keys to parking happiness, the way that we see it, or like here in Bend, or the way that I see it, and how bigger than how do we move from status quo to innovation? I think there's a little bit of this tension in the parking industry right now because we see all this innovative stuff, all these new startups coming on the market, and I think there's a whole bunch of really great approaches, great cities doing great stuff, private operators too, but it's not yet the majority, right? There's still a lot of status quo, a lot of this idea of like, it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think, how do we move out of that? And so let's dive in. So what is parking happiness for me? And the one phrase statement that I like to use, and I'm using this locally now when we're talking about this with other departments at the city, is parking happiness transforms parking into a positive community experience by ensuring convenience, accessibility, and user satisfaction. And I think that user satisfaction is something that I feel we often forgot. I don't know how it is in other environments, but we forgot that all because we always thought we know what we need to do. Our planners we have all our plans. We just need to follow them, and people, it's parking. They just need to do what we tell them. But we learned that by engaging them differently, we can learn and can shape our approaches, and we can actually create user satisfaction in parking, which then contributes to more economic mobility, more community quality of life. And I think, as weird that still sounds for even for me myself when I say it, I do think there's more and more a little bit truth to it as how our cities change, become more dense, and there's more focus on our industry as a whole. Now comes this poll, but I would love for you all to participate, and you will see this on this page on the top. If you would go to menti.com, you can do this on your phone, you can do this on your computer. You will ask for a use code, which is up here on the screen, 7381-0077. I would just be curious if everybody here who's on this webinar today, the question of parking happiness equals what to you? What would be your 1 or 3 word response to that as we are sitting here together? And I'll give it some time. I will probably not bubble on while I give you all the chance to actually go to the webpage and enter those things. I will do it myself too. Yeah, here we go. Now they're coming all in. This is great. So a lot of different words, but interestingly, compliance was leading, which is always interesting because a lot of us are parking professionals on this call. So compliance is really important to us, and I completely agree. But now easy comes as being like the boldest or the largest font so far, which is great. And I agree. Like, how do we make it easy, right? How do we get there? And I hope that a little bit, some of the ideas and the topics that we're talking about today can help us to maybe see how we can make parking more easy. So thanks so much, everybody, for participating in this. So let's move on with this. Oh, there's still more coming. So that's great too. So we wait 1 more minute if something new comes. Okay, and easy is still the number 1, convenient, simple, safety. That's all great. That's all great stuff. So no cyber trucks. That's a funny one. Haven't seen that one before. But I'll leave that for everybody to have their own opinion about that. Okay, so moving on. So what are, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, this is not like academical or anything like that. In my opinion, what are the keys to parking happiness? And so I think there's 7 keys or 7 directions that we can explore that can really change our parking systems. They're not all new, but together they can make a big difference. That's one. Number 1 is user-centric design. And user-centric design really means what we design, let's make sure that the parker, in this case, understands it. Efficient parking management, convenience and accessibility, sustainability and green initiatives, community engagement, innovation and technology, and data-driven insights. Now, let's dive into each one of that in a very high level. I promise we won't dive in onto like under the surface. We're staying a little bit probably on the 30,000 foot level, because otherwise we would take all day. Now, strategy 1, user-centric design. What does it mean? Well, for me, that means we should develop parking programs that meet the needs and expectations of our community. Often we feel we know what's best for them, but maybe if we engage our community a little bit more, we learn more about their needs and expectations, and we can then design programs that might be a little bit different what we're used to, but actually serve our community better. Focus on ease of access, right? For example, in Bend, we have one parking garage. I know YooHoo one in our downtown parking district. A lot of our locals don't even know the parking garage existed in the past because we had inadequate signage, inadequate guidance to get people there. So how do we get people access to this facility if they don't even know it's there? Convenient payment options. Now that's, I think, for me, very important. I think that's one that can easily turn a little bit difficult to address, especially in a time where we talk about equity a lot, and we talk about the most convenient way is mobile payments for many people, QR codes, guest checkout, text to pay, all those great things that are out there. But Do we leave people behind with that? I don't know. I don't think we dive into this today, but make it convenient in any way for the user so that what we ask them to do, which is to pay, they can actually do easily. And then user-friendly technology, of course, what we implement needs to be user-friendly. And we failed on that here in Bend a lot. Like we installed a garage, a park system in our parking garage in the middle of the pandemic. We struggled a lot with that. We are now probably on upgrade in version 9.0 or 10.0 of the technology, same hardware, but improvements that we made, because it just didn't work in the beginning. And so that is not user-friendly technology, but now through engaging it, not giving up and pushing through, we actually are building this more and more. And I don't think there's one vendor that there's a lot of vendors that are great. I think it starts by really identifying what the use case is that we want to solve, and then create a user-friendly approach to that. Strategy number 2, efficient parking management. So this is kind of like a list, right? Implement intelligent systems, utilize real-time data, resist to cookie cutter approach, be open to something new. Don't apply if it isn't broke, don't fix it. I'm personally very convinced that a lot of the, maybe drama is too much of a word, but a lot of the struggles that we have in our experience, in our industry, sometimes on the local level, is because we don't want to touch it, because we don't want to talk about parking, right? Like we are in Bend, we're currently in the process of modernizing our parking code, which is a great project. This was overdue for years. We're doing this now, and it's a great project because we have a lot of great people working on this as a team across different divisions and departments. But it's also a political conversation, because everybody knows that once we're bringing the conversation about parking to city council, it opens up this can of worms. And so I think there's a tendency to say we don't want to touch it because we know what's happening. And I think that's not good, because I think just with conflict in our personal lives, if we don't confront it, we're not finding a solution. So I think for me, this is really important, to looking that sometimes we need to do something new. We need to have it in the open and make it part of the conversation. Otherwise, the unspoken truth will take over. And often that's why I feel that's why the conversation in especially business districts, downtowns, the conversation about parking can be very negative, because we don't want to talk about it. Because as long as we don't talk about it, it's all good. So changing that can actually have surprising results that can build better relationships and have a better perception of parking. Strategy 3, convenience and accessibility. Now, when we hear the word accessibility, we often talk about accessible parking options, ADA parking, all that stuff. And I think that's super important, but we also have regulations that guide us in how we have to do that. For me, this means a little bit more. We should ensure that our parking facilities accommodate all parkers. Okay, well, we know most of our parking garages are laid out to have a lot of compact parking spaces. We have compact parking spaces in the garages so that we can maximize the spaces that we can build, which lowers the cost per space, all those kind of things. In our environment here in Bend, I think the majority of cars are larger than compact spaces. So that's not necessarily accommodating those parkers. There's also motorcycles, there's other vehicles. So I think accommodating all parkers means we need to look at who are our parkers a little bit differently and really creating the spaces for that. Of course, accessible parking options, thoughtful design. That sounds probably funny when I say, hey, let's create beautiful places, but it's true, right? Too often parking garages in the past, and we inherited maybe parking garages that were designed 20, 30 years ago. They're just like concrete bunkers. And what can we do to make them more lively and more friendly? So and I know a lot of this is not new information to all of you. It's just maybe a good reminder. Like we installed a lot of murals, we installed art, or we're on the way of doing that. And that makes the spaces more vibrant. And it also creates a sense of safety, right? So it's a good thing. Active wayfinding. And that's an interesting one. We talk about this a little bit more down the road. Active wayfinding is something that we know from airports. We know that from garages, right? Go turn right here to go up or this or that. But beyond that, depending on where your parking asset is, active wayfinding can also include where do people go from here, right? Like, okay, you parked in this garage. What's nearby? What are the destinations nearby? So let's go there. And then I think for me, what's important is beyond that, prepare for future use and future devices. So we all know the rise of micromobility, different new devices, cyber trucks and robo taxis. We need to start thinking about how do we react to that, and how do we, more than that, how do we prepare for that, so that our parking environments in the future make room for that. Because I firmly believe that in a few years, we are not just talking about managing parking for cars, we will also talk about managing parking for bicycles, scooters, and other devices. We might even issue tickets for them. Strategy 4, sustainability and green initiatives. What's that mean? High level. Integrate eco-friendly practices, right? Meaning, of course, promote EVs and EV charging. And I know that can be a lengthy discussion, and there's a lot change in that market and a lot of cost, right? But how do we do this slowly? Good. How can we incorporate green spaces, right? Like that might be easier on a parking lot where we make sure that our landscaping is nice or this or that, but it also could be in a off-street location or a garage where we might add some planters into our lobbies to make the spaces better, nicer, and make them more friendly for users to come. And then improve on and off-street parking structures. I know, again, nothing new, but it's this ongoing conversation, right? Maintaining parking assets costs money, a lot of money. So we don't just want to waste that to maintain what we have. We want to start thinking about, okay, so how can we make this better? Is there better use? Is there a different use? How can we move forward instead of just maintaining what we have to be vulnerable towards complaints? Strategy number 5, and this is one that I'm very passionate about, community engagement. So the picture that you see here is actually a beautiful space that we have invented. It's a co-working space, and we have done a lot of what we call ideation blitzes with our community to talk about parking, mobility, other kind of things. And it's actually interesting what happens if you foster open communication and collaboration with your local community, and if you actually ask their input on parking related decisions. And yes, as typical for every parking professional, the first meeting, you will have to have a very thick skin, because everybody or many people from the community will enter with all their opinions, their preconceived notions and all that. But something almost magical happens if you use the best tool ever invented in the world, which is 3M, I shouldn't say the vendor, Post-it notes. A magical thing happens when you actually ask them to put this all on a Post-it note and place, and then talk about this more. So we have done this a lot as we designed our new signage, as we designed our parking plan, as we designed parking districts. We really bring a core group of people together. We always make sure that we have a combination of professionals and non-professionals, or subject matter experts and non-experts, and completely different people in the room, so that we really have different opinions. It's always open. Our philosophy is always, it's never yes, but we approach these meetings with design thinking principles to always say yes, and. And so we're telling these stories, and a lot of good compromises of how we're managing things, how we're designing districts have come out of that. So I really encourage you to take your community engagement upside down. Don't be afraid of it, and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions, because often you'll find there's always an answer that if you really can listen and not just hear what people say, you actually find something that you can improve or can make better together. Strategy number 6, innovation and technology. Parking ecosystems must-haves for me. And this is really more for both front end and back end. User-friendly dashboards. Seems simple enough, but we all know that we're working with legacy tools that maybe are not so easy, and we can't find all our information. Innovative UIs for parkers. Yes, it's really important that the parker understands exactly what they have to do. And my take on innovative UIs is not just how the app works and how the pay station screen looks. Every sign for me is a UI for the parker. because the parker interacts with it, and UI stands for user interface. So how does a parker experience our signage? And I know there's not a lot of we can do because we have strict rules to communicate. But a great example, which I probably should have put on here as a picture, but I didn't, is that what I see in private lots that we have here in town is they're just inadequate signage. That it's like a 24 by 36 signs that spells out in a small font size the rules for that entire lot. It's all words. And it says underneath very in small letters, 4 hour parking. How the heck do we actually think anybody knows what they need to look for? They won't. And so I think innovative UI for parkers is not just the user face on the technology apps that we're using, it's also signage and how we communicate about parking, because that's the parkers UI. Seamless integrations. And I say this a little bit lower where I said demand integrations. I know that there's a lot of vendors in the parking space these days that have no problem building integrations, but there's still some that are very protective and don't want to do that. And I think it takes all of us to really push our technology vendors to talk more to each other, to open up their systems, to share and to integrate so that we can provide the best possible experience for the parker and for our team members. Future-proof your program. Now, this is something I talk a lot, and I think it's really important. You can only future-proof your program if you know where you're actually going. If you're always shooting out of your hip and just like react to everything, you're never future-proofing your program. You might implement great technologies, but they're not leading anywhere. So creating this roadmap of, okay, this is where we want to be in 2028. It's 2024 now. What do we need to do? Who do we need to work with? And that also means sometimes you might have technologies coming your way that are really, really great, but they're just not a fit for you because they just can't achieve what you want. And I think it's also very tempting for people, especially in my world, in my side of the equation, to wanting to change very quickly, right? Well, there's something better now. Let's switch. Not always the right thing. Sometimes we just need to stick with our foundation and then build on that. In one sentence, use the tools you need, even if that means you have to use more than one vendor. I know it's great if you have this one source for everything, but I think sometimes it's more beneficial to really pick the solutions and the technologies that you really need and ensure they're all working together. And better outcomes can come out of that at times. Okay, strategy 7, data-driven insights. Now this is a great thing to say, right? Let's do data-driven decisions. But what the heck does it actually mean? So utilize your data analytics to actually optimize your parking space allocations. Out of that, you can potentially even reduce congestions if you have a busy downtown parking district, improve your team efficiencies, enhance user experiences, engage predictive analysis models. And it's not enough to have data if you don't do anything with it, right? It looks great. You will look great in front of a lot of other divisions and departments when you can say, oh, look at my dashboard, all this data that I'm getting. But if you're not using this to actually improving your operations, you're really missing the main reason why you should do that. And now, what does it mean? What does it mean? How does it actually work? And I know I went through this quick, but this relates to this next idea of moving from status quo to innovation. Right? You can't innovate your curb if you don't know what's happening on your curb. You can't innovate your parking, let's say your compliance or enforcement team efficiencies if you don't know how they're working. So you're using the data that you're collecting to do that. But there's more to it, which is also means that you can move away from the traditional parking practices to innovate solutions. That involves embracing new technologies, always continually rethinking your existing systems. What does this not mean? This doesn't mean that what we're doing isn't right. That doesn't mean what we're doing is, excuse my language, stupid. It's not. It only means that we are driving to improve, right? This is what we expect from all our private vendors. It's actually beyond parking. It's something we expect from our phones, from our TV, from everything around us. We expect continuous improvement. That's why we hope that our apps get updated so that we are always on the latest update and so that it works and doesn't as outdated. I think that's what I mean with this, that we should rethink our existing systems to continuously seek ways to improve what we are doing and our user experiences so that we can create a better way for an experience for everybody. Advocate for change. Now, this is something that it's tough. Like I had some moments over the last 5 years where I've advocated for a lot of change in my responsible areas of responsibility in our parking system. And it can be tough, right? Because you hear a lot of no's, a lot of why would we do that? And this doesn't make any sense. And this costs money. So what I encourage everybody or hope to encourage everybody is take that tough skin that we all have as being parking people and use it also internally to advocate for change and better ways of doing it. And you might find that consistent push actually gets you something. So before we are looking at some practical examples, how we here in Bend use some of these ideas to improve things, a great success story for this advocating for change is that parking modernization project that I just mentioned here in Bend. We started out in wanting to appeal our parking code and fix it a little bit here and there. We are now talking more about a curb management code because that advocating for change to really say, look, the industry is changing. The city is changing. We have more urban dense areas now than we ever had before. We need to adjust to that. We need to set, if we are touching the code, which is a big project, we need to create a code language and regulations that work in 10 years. And so in the beginning, the conversations were parking. Now the conversations are curb management tools, curb management strategies, and parking is the number one under that. So it's really like switching this a little bit. And it was hard work. There was a lot of frustration, but now we are there. So this advocating for change really has been successful and now actually starts to feed, is that the right word? Feed into other divisions and departments within the city. And that's great. It's not fast. It's not overnight, but it can make a difference. Now let's look at a couple things. I think I have 3 slides, giving the time that we have here to look at a simple improvements that we made in Bend or changes that we implemented that had actually real impact. So one very simple thing, which I think is a success story, is we installed new signage in our entire downtown core in all our parking districts. It's a cleaner design. It clearly communicates the rules, and it identifies the rules. Meaning, I know it's small, but we went from the traditional 12 by 18 to our parking signs with timing from here to here to a larger sign that has a better branding, communicates the rules, meaning it says like 2 hours per zone, and we even communicate a zone number. Now we don't have paid parking on street. And there was, in this transition when we installed that, there was that moment where we probably had a handful of people every week or every day that wanted to pay, which is a great indicator that people are willing to pay, but we don't do that yet. But what we have noticed is that since we installed these new signs, our number of overtime citations that we issued is going down, which means our compliance is going up. And that's what we really want, because now we know that our parkers have a better experience. Because if we have more arrivals, less citations, there's something that we're doing right. Second success story is a very simple thing. And some of you might have heard me talking about that. We are still in the process. This is still new for our team, but we did this shift last summer to start talking about monthly parking by using the word subscription. So we moved from talking about parking permits to parking subscriptions. And yes, little side note, we still use the word parking permits a lot internally because it's even for me still new and it's for everybody on our team new. But we publicly changed it to a value, a basic, a premium subscription. And what we have seen within the first 3 months is that we had a 30% increase in monthly parkers. 30%. Basically overnight, not overnight, but in 3 months. because people understood the word subscription, that was simpler for them than permit. Permit was connected to, oh, this is a big thing. I need to go somewhere to the city to get a permit. To subscription, oh, is there an app for that? And yes, there's an online platform where you can sign up. So huge increase, which what did this lead to in addition to what did this 30% increase lead to? More parking availability on street, because we have now less workers and business owners that are parking all day in our streets or moving from space to space to avoid the time limit. So which means we have higher compliance. That's a great thing. So it's a great success. Then last one for today, parking guidance. Now here's a few pictures of the parking guidance system that we installed. The left picture is a small circular sign that we have installed at certain intersections in our downtown core, as well as the entry points to our parking lots. On the parking lots, there's just one number that like in real time, communicates the available spaces on that parking lot. On the street, the system actually shows the parking availability online, on street for the next block over until the next sign and intersection. So if you drive up to the sign, I know it's small, you might not be able to see it great. I can send you pictures if you're interested, if you email me later. So on this sign, for example, you see 12, which is the parking lot to the left, and then you see another number that you won't see on this picture, but the driver can see it very well. You see a straight and left turn arrow, so you see where that parking is available. This updates in real time, and it's actually quite amazing how that has impacted our parking system downtown. On the right image shows our large signs, so these are large VMS signs that update in real time. We're communicating our surface lots, our parking garage, and on-street parking. We have 2 of these large signs on the north and the south entry point into the downtown parking district. And then we follow this up, which I probably should have put on here, but sometimes I'm not that smart, with good old-fashioned wayfinding signs that now call out every lot by name, and then they're stacked depending on the intersection where we guide people. So we went live in about December 2023, and these numbers are as real as it gets. We have seen, now this is kind of like really, we didn't expect this. We have seen since we turned this on, about 27% increase in transient parking transactions in our paid lots, which that is compared over the previous year month for the same time. So December, January, February, March, April, May of 2024, compared to those months in 2023, we increased with paid parking transactions in our surface lot, in our garage, across the board, an average of 26.86%. On the same note, we decreased citation issuance by 12.5%. June is a little bit of an off month for us because we had some staffing issues with our enforcement contractor. But it is interesting because we are significantly down month over month in citation revenue for the first 5 months of 2024. But we are so much up in paid parking transaction from, 221 surface lot spaces and about 547 spaces in a parking garage, that we are still in a positive increasing trend with overall revenue. So meaning our paid parking revenue has made up the loss that we had in citation revenue from the investment of the parking guidance system, which is a huge success, because what this also means is that we have less circular traffic. We are working on putting numbers behind it right now and actually measuring how much greenhouse gas emissions we were able to lower with that. And we have more parking availability now because of that on the street, because people are moving where they want. More than that, and I don't have a slide for this, but anecdotal data for you, more than that, we now see for every day our arrivals, how many arrivals we had per block, per space, what's the length of stay. Length of stay was very surprising to us, because the common understanding from our business community was 2-hour parking limit is not long enough. Everybody wants to stay longer. Well, our overall average length of stay in our on-street parking downtown is 1 hour and 46 minutes currently, under 2 hours. Perfectly fine. Does it mean there's people that stay less? Yes. Does it mean that there's people stay longer? For sure, that's why it's an average. But now what we do with this data soon is that we actually analyze each block to find out where do people stay longer, where do they stay not so long, what's the nature of the businesses there, would it make sense for us to adjust the rules per block to actually react to that and make it more better. But big story here is these numbers don't lie, right? Like that is a huge increase in paid transactions and a good decrease in citation issuance. So we're getting more compliance on all fronts, which is great. Now, that all said, that was it. I know this was not too fast, 45 minutes-ish. So I will unshare this now. I hope you got something out of it. And if anybody have any questions, feel free to ask them now or be forever quiet.
Hi, Tobias. Would you be able to put your email in the chat?
Sure.
Thank you.
Tobias, I got a question for you. With your community board that you do with the Post-it notes, how often do you update topics on that board?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do these strategic if we want to make a decision about something. So for example, the latest one that we did was a couple months ago. It's a funny one because it's not really parking, but it's parking. There's this alley that we have that I probably shouldn't say alley because some people call it a street, other people call it a promenade, other people call it an alley that is basically between the downtown businesses, our parking lots, and then the river. And the desire from some of our councils was to close that for vehicle traffic. And as you can imagine, all the businesses on that alley are getting their deliveries through that. The farmers market is in that, right? So that became something where we need to engage our community. So we actually did 3 meetings with them where we sat them down and we went through that. And we said, look, we haven't made a decision, but this is what we're trying to do. So this is really a tool we are using when we have to make a decision that we feel will be controversial and might get negative impact. And we are very strategic that we are not afraid to inviting people that are very loud against parking. Little side note for that is, I think I still remember when I started this position, like in 2019, I was here 2 weeks and I was invited to come and introduce myself to the Downtown Business Association and give like an overview of our parking plan, which I did. It turned out to be a 45-minute shouting match from them at me, like telling me how bad everything is, right? And so I think things like this can actually, you're being more proactive because you're engaging them and helping you making the decisions. We did this with signage back in the day when we designed the signs. We had like focus groups that we brought together to help us pick the one that works the best.
Thank you.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, good morning. This is Sergio, City of Ventura. Just appreciate the information. Always something new to learn on this topic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Tobias, I'm curious to know what data collections did they have before you implemented the dashboard? And how was it being used prior to?
That's a great idea. So we really didn't do any data collection at all, except when we did a parking study in the past every couple of years, and then we hired a consultant to come and count. What we had started doing is so in 2020, we went away from our legacy tools that we use through our parking management contractor and brought everything in-house and switched to a new technology, digitalizing our permits, subscriptions, all that, and went with a vendor to create our parking ecosystem dashboard in the past. We implemented LPR for that and got an LPR vehicle, and we started using that vehicle to actually do counts in our neighborhoods, street blocks on specific times, so we can get a better baseline for data collection. And then that was really all we could do. And then you could, I mean, like we all do, right? We know how many transactions we have, but until you don't really know how many cars you actually had in a specific space, it's still a very variable number to assume that, well, we must have had this many cars. Now we get every transaction that we can see in every parked car, right? I know exactly for every space how many arrivals I had every day, which is great. Did that answer the question?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, we'll let you go. We're closing a little bit earlier. I hope you enjoyed some of it. If I put my email in the chat, if you have any questions, are curious about anything, feel free to reach out. Also keep in mind, I don't know if that's Darby saying that, but I'm just going to say that the Swapter conference is probably, no offense to any other association, but it's probably the most fun parking conference you will ever attend. It's every year in Vegas. It's happening this year again, October 28th through the 30th. Hope to see you all there. Check out the webpage and follow us on LinkedIn to stay up to date in what we are up to and doing. And we go from there. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tobias.